It is truly a different world, or our awarenesses of the barriers between people that were in the world have seemed to have just dissipated. Between cultures, I'm seeing a real diversity. I mean, an integration of cultures, an integration of people communicating that has been different than I've ever seen. It feels different. What's your experience with that?
Well, I read an article many years ago about this idea that when the computer came into being and we started developing these technological systems and networking systems,
sure,
that formed something in the psychic realm that connected us in ways that we had never been connected before. It was almost like the earth had this brain that could think in one whole piece as opposed to tiny bits. And it does seem that if you look at, let me think back to my earliest working with computers would have been in the early 80s. I always look at the John Randolph Price idea in 1986 when he did the World Healing Meditation, and he said literally that this will shift the planet. And then 1 year later we did the Harmonic Convergences in 1987, and then we had these things in place. I can remember one of the first uses I had of the internet was when there was a group of Native Americans that were walking across the country for racial healing, and we began to get how powerful it was that they could tell us where they were and they could write up their writings, and then we could email them and get information on what it was that we would do in our city. And that whole concept was so different from anything we had ever experienced. You know, we weren't even in cell phones hardly back then.
No.
And all of a sudden it was like, this is going to just change everything. And so it has, because, you know, people chat with people in the other parts of the world. Mm-hmm. Of course, we've got, you know, you answer the phone, somebody in India answers it. I always say, well, where are you? Are you in Mumbai? Are you in Chennai? Where are you? And usually they're there or Delhi.
Mm-hmm. Are they impressed that you've been there? That you have been there yourself?
I don't know that people are impressed I've been there, but I always feel some kind of connection. You know, they'll say, you know, I'm in Mumbai, and I haven't been there, and I didn't go there on this trip. I went there years ago. So.
Mm-hmm. How cool! What was your introduction into metaphysics? Were you, as a little girl, were your parents in metaphysics, or were you introduced that way? What was your root in?
My mother was into weird-physics. She was weird. Because I can remember her talking about healing and having the power to heal people, that evidently she had some kind of intermittent powers, and she had nervous breakdowns. And it worried me, and I held back my connection with the spiritual dimension because I was afraid that I would go off the deep end like she tended to do, because she would have psychotic breakdowns, but she also had a lot of spiritual connections. And often my sister said if metaphysics had been in place at the point when she was younger, then maybe she wouldn't have gone off the deep end. She wouldn't have felt so isolated and alone, but she didn't know. But when I was 13, I read all the metaphysical books in the Pitt County Library, and that was in North Carolina. And I read
Christian Science.
Like There Is a River by Edgar Cayce, and I read about Bridie Murphy and reincarnation, mm-hmm. and just everything that I could find there, and just was always fascinated with it. And when I was even 4, I mean, I was going to tent revivals when I was 4 years old. I took my mother to church. I was always looking for the mystical within the church.
Uh-huh. How wonderful. And then how did you find religious science, and how has that fed you?
How did I find religious science? I lived in Tennessee, and I founded an EZosophy church in I co-founded it, and that was in the early 80s. Mm-hmm. And I read the Science of Mind literature, but we didn't have a Science of Mind church there. So my first experience of Science of Mind was just picking up the books and reading them. I got the big book and read about Ernest Holmes, and read Ernest Holmes, wrote a great write-up about New Thought movement and how it all started, and so it was really good to find my roots through reading that material. But it was really only when I moved to Texas in the 98 that I was able to begin speaking out and attending the Science of Mind churches, and then I moved on this side of town and just love Jesse.
Isn't he something?
He is.
He is really. I think we're so fortunate. And so where do you want to speak? Where are the venues that you would like to take your message, and what kind of messages are resonating with you or cooking on your burners?
Well, I want to speak anywhere where there's a group of people. I like speaking at Unity and Science of Mind. I've been fortunate to speak at some conferences when people just call me up and said, hey, come speak here. And that's normally not the kind of thing you can do except for manifestation. Just visualizing myself speaking to an audience, and they call me up. I'm willing to speak to anybody that wants to speak to me. I haven't had that much goals, but I try to. A lot of times what I do is that I find somebody I know, and then I'll go to that area and I'll say, let's find something. Like I've got 5 churches right now in 5 different cities, and I said, okay, I need to get that going. I've got somebody that'll help me out there. And so that's where I go.
And what kinds of things are you speaking on now? Of course, EZosophy.
Well, I speak about EZosophy, and I just don't know. I go with the flow, and sometimes it's the old material because it just feels like that. I find that every audience has a signature, an energy signature, and I can almost tell what I need to draw from. Usually there's some material of whatever's present in my life now. Because it's what I speak about is almost like a movie. I'm going to be talking to you probably about the movie I saw this week, not the movie I saw 6 months ago. And that's the way it is with what I want to talk about with people in the audience. And I don't know. I always go with a speech. I'll grab 1 or 2 written speeches, and sometimes I'll spend 2 or 3 days and I'll write this marvelous speech and I love it, and I won't say a single word off that speech on my talk because I go with the flow of what is. And sometimes, even though it's very brilliant, it's something that can be read. I'm generally not the kind of person that reads a talk. Unless there's some specific points that I won't remember, but I'll just be looking at the points. I won't be reading the talk. And there's not anything wrong with reading your talks. No. It's just that I'm closer to the words than the paper gets in the way.
Sure. When you're up there and you've made that connection with the audience and you feel the words just tumbling out, and that must be an extraordinary.
It's an extraordinary experience, and sometimes what happens is that everything comes together like a hologram. It's like I can just see everything. I can see down the line to the end of the speech, and it's like, oh my gosh. And then there are other times where there are profound things that I watch as they come through my mouth, and an idea or a realization, and I am just astounded at the cleverness of it, and it's like I can't stop and say. I sound like really prideful. It's like, wow, that's such a cool idea. How neat! I never thought of that, because I don't feel like I'm thinking it. Fortunately, I can get out of the way enough. I think that's one of the reasons that I like speaking, is because it's easier to get out of the way when I speak. If I meditate, then I want to get out of the way all the time in terms of the personality of Ann Gillis, because that personality, I found, it may have some delightful scenarios, but with those delightful scenarios of being a personality and a body and all of those kinds of things, there's an anchor to suffering. And what I found out is the more that I can let go of my personal identity and keep my mind solid and straight, keep my awareness here and there, and allow whatever it is that is to be and anything else to come through, then that's where the action really is. And that's that state where I say that when I'm doing, I don't even know that I'm doing. I just love it. Tasks that I think, oh, when will I ever get to that? I'm in the middle of that very task saying, I am dharmically correct. This is the perfect thing that I was made to do in this moment. And it might be polishing a shoe, but in it there's this great sense of connectedness and sacredness. And so it's not, and I've wanted to live a lot for the great moments, but I found out, and the great moments to me were when I was doing something like being in front of an audience of 1,000 people and doing all that great stuff. But yet to find that the moment is just as great, polishing the shoe, is when the real fun begins. It's like, oh my gosh, there's no place in which this absolute incredible living presence, which is life itself, is not here.